The year was 2001, and a young Scojo, growing up in Western Sydney, waking up after a nice teenage sleep. Probably had a wet dream about Nelly Furtado or something. And I remember I shared a room with my brother, and he woke me up. And I remember vividly him saying, like, "Oi, come out and check the news, bro. Some fucking planes just slammed into some buildings in America." And I remember it was like just happening as I was waking up for school. And I remember going out and watching the little shitty TV we had in the living room in our little house in Campbelltown, and just being horrified at what I was seeing, because obviously we knew at that moment, although we were pretty young and immature, and I probably still am young and immature, but we knew that that was going to change the world. And it's pretty crazy to think that only a couple of years later, it was going to have such an impact on my life that I'd be overseas fighting against those cunts that fucking did that. And I remember seeing, cunts like Anthony Mundine fucking gobbing off on the TV and wanting to hit him, but I was only a piss weak little, 12-year-old or something. And I remember seeing they crossed over to like the Middle East, and there was the footage of like kids my age dancing in the street when they'd heard the news that that Al Qaeda had waged jihad on the West, and that they fucking had a decent crack at it, to be honest. And I remember seeing all these kids about my age dancing in the street. So all I wanted to do when I got over there years later was shoot them in the legs. And I guess it's important to go back and think how I got to that point, and the decisions that led up to my life making some pretty big decisions, rather than go to university or fucking become a chippy or a sparky or whatever like most of my mates did. It was pretty important to me to sort of understand how I went down that path and that trajectory that ultimately has me here talking about Warriors from fucking 10 years ago, for all you loose cannons that just want to hear a little bit of violence and a little bit of fucking realism in your day. So I guess it definitely had an impact on me. And we had some very good family friends at the time that were in the police force, and obviously they'd started to step up. ASIO and all the agencies were starting to spool up and develop and start tracking the targets that they thought might be threats back home. So the moment that I left high school, what actually I did was I was hell-bent on becoming a cop. So I thought that in my community, I didn't even really consider the military, although I grew up pretty close to the base. It was always in the back of my mind, but my goal was actually to become AFP or ASIO, ASIS, or one of the agencies essentially, and then worst case I'll just join New South Wales Police, no dramas, and be general duties and walk around and just bash cunts and try and get a few shots off at any of the terrorists that want to fuck around. So I applied for, I'm only 18 years old at this time, and I'm applying for ASIS, ASIO, and New South Wales Police. And obviously ASIS, you needed a university degree to get in as a requirement, so that was fucking dead in the water. ASIO, I passed, I think, to the second level of testing to get into their organization as an intelligence officer, and I made it. I think I went up to Brizzy and I did a whole bunch of testing and aptitude testing and physical testing, and got to the point where it was an interview. Essentially they said, "Jog on, cunt, get some life experience, and then come back to us. You literally have nothing to bring to the party other than the fact that you just passed high school, so beat it." So threw in an app for New South Wales Police, and unfortunately the only thing that held me back was that I had a speeding ticket, or not a speeding ticket, a ticket from a cop who was just a local cop in a small country town that I blew through on the way to soccer training out in a little place called Picton. And this motherfucker gave me a ticket for not displaying the full P plate. So I had my, riced up little rice burner car that I had, and naturally I was moving so fast in that little 2-cylinder that the P plates kept flying off. So I shoved it sort of half under the number plate, so only half of the letter P was displayed. So he gave me a ticket for that, and that literally prevented me from getting into the cops. So they said, you got to wait, I think it was just 12 to 24 months, and then I could reapply if I hadn't got any speeding fines in that time. But in that time alone, while I was sort of waiting to reapply, naturally, when you grow up out west and you're doing fucking skids every night, every time it rains, you're going to Macca's car park and throwing a couple of Macca's trays under your wheels and just getting sideways around the car park. I ended up with a few more fines, and therefore my chances of ever becoming a cop were completely diminishing every fucking day. So I thought, well, shit, what do I want to do? And we talked about how I went to the Royal Military College, so I just assumed, well, if you're going to join the military, you want to be an officer because that sounds like the go. And the commandant of the Royal Military College told me, like, ooh, after spending a couple of days with you, I'm pretty sure you would make a better digger. And I went, no dramas. So I went back to defense recruiting, where I obviously crushed my aptitude test and got in the top 5%, so I could be a electronic warfare operator, unlike some of my friends, the operators amongst us, who are now stuck teaching Iraqis star jumps. So that went pretty well for me in the long run. And so joined up, and well, the rest is history. So we've talked about sort of how my early career was, and we talked about sort of everything that I went through to get there. But the amount of people that fucking want to just constantly hit me up for selection advice, and I constantly handball them off to someone like Reese Dowden, or someone that actually has a podcast and a platform designed to help people pass selection. Good for them and good luck to them, but whatever. So yeah, I guess what I didn't realize is that when I was going through this whole process to become a cop, and all I really wanted to do was to tap some tangos, or to kill some terrorists, I'm sitting at home double tapping pictures of J-Lo on Instagram, while the boys, 5 minutes away from me, are flying overseas and double tapping people in the head. So, you only know what you know, and I didn't know that I was living so close to where I would eventually end up working. Obviously Jennifer Lopez, just to go back, like, her ass fucking insane. So I could hear the boys blowing in the tag compound, and I'm blowing onto the J-Lo poster in my room. Mate, her ass is ridiculous. Do yourself a favor, hit pause on this and go back and just watch a couple of those early 2000 Jennifer Lopez R&B videos. Holy moly. And ass and tits, the constant debate, what do you want, ass or tits? Are you an ass man or a tits man? Well, at the end of the day, an ass is really just a set of tits without the nipples. So that's that. I'm glad we clarified that. So my selection application goes in, that we've talked about before. I end up finding myself on a selection course. But before that happened, the way that I sort of got to the level of, I talked about reading the Soldiers Junior Woodchuck to get up to speed with everything that was going on and all the skills that I was deficient in. But the one thing that really helped me was there's a Special Forces direct entry program that I talked about before, where the only dude that I knew in the military had come through that way. And the way that program was designed, so dudes come off the street, they go to Kapuka, then they go to Singleton, they do their 3-month IET course to become a rifleman, then they go into an advanced course. It's a little bit different now, but back when it was, when I went through, it was called AIT, or Advanced or Accelerated Infantry Training, which was an 8-week dedicated package about purely commando skills that was designed for the Special Forces DRS guys before they attempted selection. And the year that I was going for selection, thankfully, so many grunts or direct entry guys had washed out along the way, whether it was at Kapuka or Singo. So let's say they had a course, an AIT course that was ready in September for 30 people, and only 5 DRS dudes had made it to that point. So they had 25 spots for random pogues like myself, Navy dudes, Raffies, Clarks, and Chocos, anyone that wanted to upskill themselves and could apply for that course, so that it was pretty much the blueprint for selection. So it was the same PTI and staff that were going to run the selection course a few months later. So we were kind of like the guinea pigs, where we did the exact same navigation course, the exact same checkpoints, the exact same live fire ranges and weapons ranges that we're going to do on selection. We did them as a course for AITs. So basically, it was one less thing that we had to worry about, because you didn't need to worry about range rules and arcs of fire and different things when you were stressed out, because you'd done, I've done fucking 50 run-throughs of this slip lane before. I know where the dart mechs are placed. I know where that dart mech target's going to pop up. So I can actually know where they're trying to trick you and sort of put you in a situation to confuse you, where you might end up shooting across one of your mates' arcs and getting a bit too close to shooting one of your mates. So yeah, naturally, I think for the most part, almost everyone on the AIT course then went on to crush selection. So that really helped me out. And now it's kind of called something else, and it's run out of Holsworthy at the SOTEC facility. But yeah, it's fucking awesome. So that obviously set me up for success. And then I got onto selection, and I remember I did everything that I could under the sun. I read every book, every kind of mostly American Special Forces selection videos. There's plenty of them on YouTube. There's a Green Beret one, like 2 Weeks in Hell. There's the US one, the UK SAS, Navy SEALs, Bud Week. And then obviously you've got the Search for Warriors, which is the Australian SAS one. So I watched them fucking religiously to understand what it was like, what kind of exercises they were doing, what did the stands look like, how were they treated, what did the guys that got through, what were their attitudes like versus the shit cunts that got buzzed off. And I guess the biggest piece of advice that I got off someone that didn't make sense until later on, years later, when I said to my mate, who was a commando, and I said, bro, what was the hardest thing about selection? What was the thing that almost broke you? And it didn't make sense at the time, but he said, selection isn't the hard part, cunt. The hardest thing about that job is actually doing the job. Cunts go down in Afghanistan with heat because it's that fucking hard, and you're carrying that much weight, and it's that fucking hectic that grown assaulters, grown operators go down with heat and have to be stretcher carried out of the fucking valley off jobs. And I was like, what? I'm talking about selection, bro. Well, so I was confused, he was confused, and years later, that actually made sense when we did a job, and that small team that I was with, I guess the dudes that were there would definitely know what I'm talking about. Holy fuck. We had a 20k infill, and thankfully the partner force drove us about 10 kilometers of the way there. So we had about a 10 kilometer infill from sundown, and we had to be on the other side of this ridge line by sunrise the next morning. And I was the lead scout with a couple of snipers and partner force and my interpreter. And the altitude was that high. I think it was only like 8,000 feet or something, but I'd never been that high before, ever. Because Mount Kosciuszko is like fucking whatever, cunt. And you're on a chairlift. You're not really working too hard. You're just going down a hill on a fucking toboggan. So, man, I'd never felt that way before. Even when I'm on my biggest bender of my life, I've never felt that much pain in my lungs and my whole body. And I'm carrying about 40 kilos worth of shit, walking up this sheer fucking, almost a sheer cliff, trying to get to this position by first light. And we ended up walking from about 8 p.m. till the sun came up at about 5 o'clock the next morning, and we had made it 300 fucking meters. And we were walking non-fucking stop. So it was, you'd walk about 10 meters, and you would have to stop for 10 meters, for about 10 minutes to let other people catch up and so that you could catch your breath, because we were all that finger banged with like altitude sickness and the weight on us and the stress of like under night vision trying to climb a cliff while you're fucking looking out for the enemy. And yeah, I was kind of got to the point where I was like, man, I hope the Taliban just kind of pop up and just kill us all, because I'm finger banged and I don't really want to walk anymore, but I'm not going to give up. And then the next morning, helos just came in and grabbed us, and they called it a lily pad, where they just basically picked us up and then flew us over the top of this cliff and dropped us on the other side so that we could support the boys. But naturally, then that element of surprise is gone, which that was the whole reason that we were fucking doing that infill, and fucking hell, that was rubbish, absolute dog shit. So then I understood what my mate was saying by selection is just a fucking course, mate, but the actual job's hard. That's why selection's hard. And then I understood what he was saying, but that was fucking years later. So on selection, then people will talk to me and say like, well, what was the hardest thing that you did on selection? And dudes, especially like the SIGs that I work with, would always hit me up and be like, well, what's the fucking chops, Gojo? Like, what did you do? And one story always comes to mind, and I guess this will give you a pretty good gauge about the 6-week selection course that we had to do. It was about halfway through. It was summertime in up in Singleton, and those that are in the army will know, and you civvy little bitches won't know unless maybe you work at the mines or somewhere fucking hot out on the farm, where you know what prickly heat is. And prickly heat is basically you've got a shirt on that doesn't breathe, and you've got your backpack and body armor or webbing on rubbing against your back that's sweaty and dirty, and you haven't showered in a couple of days, and all your pores start to clog up on your back. So your pores clog up with the dirt and the sweat, and then you start to get pretty much it's like acne on all over your back. And the only way to get rid of it is to obviously wash your back and air it out and sort of let it all fucking get out. But it gets pretty gross and pussy, and it's super fucking uncomfortable because you got a backpack rubbing on like, 50 fucking zits on your back. So one thing that you do and you learn when you're in Singleton is the boys hop in the hot showers, you steam the cunt up, and you just got 50 naked dudes with a metal school ruler, and you're literally from the top to bottom scraping down the pus and shit off his back, and it's sort of opening up all those pores with the water running over it, and that definitely helps with obviously soapy water and shit. So you stand there naked, doing a bit of cock watching while you're ripping your mate's back down with a metal fucking ruler to get rid of all this pus. So everyone on our selection course was obviously getting it because it was fucking hot. And I think we started with about 130 people, and we're down to about maybe 70. So we still had a few weeks to go, and they still needed to fuck off a bunch of the weak cunts so that the rest of us could go off onto the reinforcement cycle. And some hero must have gone up to the DS and said like, staff, a lot of the boys have got prickly heat, so we need to see the med staff and maybe get some cream or something. And the med staff and the selection staff came out, called us all to parade, formed us up in 3 ranks on the grass, and said, righto cunts, we're going to do a little exercise because apparently a lot of you boys have got prickly heat. So what they did was they formed us up in 3 ranks, and there's 70 dudes on the grass, and they said, give yourself some space. And then what we did was they said the only way to get rid of prickly heat without having constant showers and cream is to open the pores up. So then they said, well, does anyone have a problem with the CDF's directive and the Army Sun Smart policy where you have to work with a shirt on? No one obviously is going to put their hands up and say that they care about OH&S when you're joining a fucking regiment whose sole purpose is to run around the globe shooting cunts in the fucking face. So no one put their hands up, so everyone took their shirt off. So we're wearing cam pants and boots. And then they said, all right, well, what we're going to do, boys, the best way to get rid of this prickly heat is to open your pores up. So we need to do some exercise in the sun and let it all sort of open up. So they said, what we're going to do is we're going to do burpees until 2 of you quit. So we're going to have our shirts off and we're going to be out here. We're going to do sets of 50 and we're going to do 50 burpees, have a small break, and just keep going and going and going until at least 2 people quit. And that's exactly what happened. So the divots in the ground were fucking epic. In the 3 files, you had just fucking massive divots everywhere because everyone's just doing shit quality burpees, just getting absolutely fed by these 3 directive staff, the DS, while we just did burpees in the sun until 2 people quit. And eventually I remember seeing one dude quit because he had a complaint about his shoulder or something. Little fucking bitch, see you later, good riddance. And then everyone was, I think we got up to about 170 odd fucking burpees in the sun. And this is obviously, you're not doing burpees fresh. Like, we're already fingered from everything else that we've been doing for 3 weeks. Most dudes had lost about 10 kilos. You're that finger banged. You haven't slept or eaten properly in days. And you're just doing burpees in the fucking summer sun. So eventually another dude I think he went down, and then they said, sweet, that's 2 dudes, cool, they're off the course now. Are we happy that our pores are now opened up and everyone learned to shut their fucking mouths? So that is the kind of vibe that it is on selection. And I don't know if that's still a fucking something that they make you do, but yeah, it was looking back on it, it was pretty fucking brutal. It was pretty fucking funny. So that's the kind of vibe that I got on selection. And obviously it's good that we got rid of those cunts, because if you're going to quit because burpees are hard, you're probably going to quit when you're scaling a fucking cliff in the middle of the night in Afghanistan and just lay down and fucking give up. So that's why they do shit like that. And that's how you get rid of most of the weak cunts. Obviously a few fucking sneak through and you see them on 4 corners and stuff later on in life. But there's only so much you can do in a 6-week period to get rid of as many people as you can, so you can focus on the dudes that are, end up probably going overseas and serving their country. So, well, a lot of people then ask me, so you said in one of the first episodes that you were a SIG. So how did you become, so then you're a SIG and then you're in Afghanistan and you had a Green Beret, but you're a SIG and you're talking about doing EW stuff and you're not a sniper and you're a shit shot. So what's the fucking go? Well, it's probably time we clarify that. So people have done a better justice than me on other podcasts and stuff in the past. Dudes like Mitch McAllister, Adrian Humphreys, and a few others that were actually SIGs, just like myself, that end up being what we called a Cat B. So they have 2 categories back up until about 2012. You could actually do whatever job that you were doing in the army, do selection, and remain in your current job role, but you just had a Green Beret and you were upskilled. So obviously you could integrate with the teams overseas, and more than likely you would stay in the same platoon headquarters position for your whole career until you determined it was time to go up or move or post out if you had to. Whereas most of the other support staff or enablers are just there for a year or 2 and then they post back out or move or get promoted and move to a different position. So the idea behind a Cat B was that you would have medics, you would have SIGs, you would have bears, radio operators, and other random enablers, intelligence guys that were actually qualified and had passed selection and wore a Green Beret, just like the commandos did. But your primary role or your original core is still, for me, for example, RA SIG, so a signaler, a comms guy. And one of the funniest ones that I ever saw, and he's an absolute legend, there's actually a qualified Cat B Chippy. So an army construction dude who walks around with a Green Beret and a King G short shorts and a King G shirt, just absolutely fucking killing it. Because I don't know if you've ever seen him kicking around, it's like seeing a unicorn. He's an absolute weapon, and I was in Iraq with him and I fucking he couldn't tell me the story enough that he was a qualified commando, and to see him put his green bezer on and walk into the mess in his King G's was absolutely outstanding. But as you can then imagine, that the Cat A operators or shooters that would see a SIG like myself, a skinny, gobby little fuckwit SIG, or a Chippy walking around with a Green Beret, they really didn't like it. Although they know, and they'll never admit it, that a Cat B SIG in their team over a non-qualified SIG, a SIG that hasn't done selection, there's absolutely no way that they would choose a SIG that hasn't done selection over a SIG that has and has a Green Beret. And the proof in the pudding is that I'll say I'm probably the only SIG or the only Cat B commando that spent his whole career in the one single team. So about 6-7 years, and I was in the one team that whole time. Most of the other Cat B SIGs had sort of switched between companies and jobs, or maybe posted to Perth and then came back to Sydney, but I stayed in the same team. And the reason why I did selection is because I wanted to be a better support element to the shooters on the ground that were doing the job. And I didn't want them to have to worry about, well, fuck, Skojo's on this job and we're about to assault this compound, and Skojo doesn't know what the fuck he's doing because he hasn't done selection. So apply safe, Skojo. Don't even load your fucking weapon. Just put a mag in, but don't action up because we're scared of you, we don't trust you or whatever. That's the vibe most shooters push towards dudes that aren't qualified. So I always thought to myself, well, I want to get to the point where if there's only 8 seats on a Black Hawk and we're going to do a hit on a compound, they're going to drop one of the shooters off the Orbat to put me in, because although I haven't been on the tools as much as the other boys, and on tag I was doing specialist stuff when they were assaulting rooms every day, I could do their job and they couldn't do mine. So there's that old saying that you hear, like, fuck with truckies, and dumb cunt Pogue says, like, oh, well, I can do his job, but he can't do mine. Well, not necessarily, because those boys are operating at a pretty high level. And although their primary skill set is, the main thing that they do in life is walking through a door first, it is, back in the Afghan days, being a shooter, being an operator was fucking definitely something to be revered and something that everyone respected. If you're a shooter and you had a green beret or a sandy beret and you walked through the mess with that little bad boy flicking out of your pocket, chicks were sliding off their seats. All the support staff dudes are starting to rub themselves up through their pockets while they're eating their lunch, because everyone knew at that specific time, if you were a shooter and you'd served in Afghanistan, you probably bodied at least a dozen cunts. You look at the statistics that they say that we killed up to, I think, 12,000 Taliban insurgents in Afghanistan over 20 rotations, and there's only a few hundred, if that, operators that are qualified that ever served in Afghanistan. And you split those numbers up, well, you can clearly see that the boys were getting fucking some serious blood on their hands overseas, and it was fucking awesome. Now, obviously, things have changed a lot now, and most of the operators in the units, most of the shooters, they've never fucking killed anyone. They've never fired their gun in anger. Only the senior dudes, and most of the senior dudes are either getting kicked out right now by Angus, or they're getting dragged through the mud through the investigation. They're stressed the fuck out. They've got mental health issues. All their bodies are broken, and it's time for them to move on. So, another sort of pet hate of mine is, like, you'll hear plenty of operators say, like, oh, well, Cat Bs aren't real fucking operators. They're not shooters. They're just enablers. Like, yeah, well, that's true. That's not our primary skill set. But at the same time, in the later rotations of Iraq, more recently, if you're a shooter, you weren't fucking doing anything. You were basically just sitting in the tent reading a Kindle, while all the JTACs, Int dudes, Bears, SIGs, and medics were going to town and using fucking drones and highly sensitive equipment to wipe out the Islamic State. So, checkmate, cunts. The world fucking turns, and if you don't evolve with it and you don't become important or useful to the organization, then you just end up in a support position where someone said it once, and I thought it was pretty funny, and it rolled up the boys pretty hard, that basically the shooters had become support staff, and the support staff had become the supported. So, like, woo! That's every shooter that's listening to this podcast right now is just starting to flip tables, but it's the way of the world. Technology's changed, and we don't need to send. We're always going to have a need for shooters to run through a door in a stronghold situation or a hostage recovery and grab someone. But more than likely, unless you've got a specialized skill set as a shooter now, you're fucking lacking, bro, and you need to maybe think about your life choices. So, going back to then my reinforcement cycle, So there was, I think, 4 Cat Bs on my selection course that got through and were on the Rio. And about halfway through the Rio, there was, I think, 3 SIGs and 1 medic. And one of the dudes was, he'd done a lot. He'd spent a lot of time with the company that were actually our staff. And obviously they wanted him in the unit. And that's good because obviously they've validated him already. He was a good shot and he was fucking crushing it. So they offered us all a spot as Cat A's. So what happened halfway through our reinforcement cycle, the Special Forces Command had changed the fact that there will be no more Cat Bs. So they said, you guys are not going to be Cat Bs anymore. You either can switch over to be Cat A shooters, 079s, and leave your job and all your training behind and just be an assaulter, or you can remain a Cat B, but you'll just get a Cat A pass, get your beret, get your pay rise, but after 3 or 4, 5, 6 years, your core, your mustering can just post you out as normal, like a normal support staff dude that's posted there. So I think one dude switched over and became a 079, and good for him. But the 3 of us that were SIGs were like, nah, bruh. We know that we're going to be employable with these skill sets when your time in the military ends. So, which was very, very true, and it was an extremely good decision for the rest of us, because now we're in some pretty specialized roles throughout the world. One dude's still in, but I know both of us are sort of in the corporate world, and I definitely do not regret my decision at all, because I would have had nothing to fall back on. I could have worked in private security, could have worked in some kind of training role, opened a fucking CrossFit gym, who knows, not interested, rather would be doing that sensitive kind of, I don't even know how to put it, that secret squirrel shit that I used to do. So, yeah, I don't regret my decision, and I'm happy that I didn't switch over to 079. So people want to say, like, talk about pogues versus non-pogues. Well, then to sort of harp on that point, I know pogues, let's say Sean McCarthy, for example. He was a bear that was killed working with the SAS in Afghanistan, and he actually died because a shooter couldn't keep his wheels on the right track and fucking hit an IED, and he got flown out of the turret and was killed. And he actually died in one of my good friend's arms, who was his deck commander overseas for the SAS. And and obviously it hurts him still to this day. So to hear people say like, you're just a pogue, you're a Cat B, or you're not a real shooter, you're an operator. Well, plenty of fucking non-shooters died over there and got injured. And I've said before, one of my good mates, Timmy, he's a quadriplegic because a shooter crashed a Bushmaster into a parked car in Afghanistan, and the turret of the Bushmaster lid slammed on his fucking neck and snapped his neck in half. So, SIGs were fucking getting shot. One of the SIGs got shot. I know a Rafi with a commendation for gallantry. I know SIGs with medals of gallantry. I know an engineer with a medal of gallantry. I know multiple support staff members with citations for gallantry. And I know shooters that have been sent home for cowardice on operations. And that's for real. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And someone said to me once, courage doesn't live in a hat badge. And I think that's one of the most truest things that I've ever heard in my military career. And another dude put it to me another way, where he said, it doesn't matter what your job or role was in the Special Operations Command when we were fighting overseas. It was... you could only validate a dude whether he had been tested or not. And he joked about actually getting shirts made up for the dudes that had actually served in Afghanistan that just said tested across the front, because you'd either been tested or you hadn't been tested. And right now, it's unclear when you see a dude that's SF, with a sandy beret or a green beret, has he been tested or not? Who fucking knows? And you'll never know until it happens. And some dudes found out the hard way when we didn't know who these fucking rats and snitches were. And then you see them on the news, you see them on Four Corners dogging the boys, and you go, well, throughout all the selection and training in Rio that we did, there's no way that you can train for And we did interrogation training. We call it going in the bag, where we do counter interrogation training. As you know, I'm sure you've seen the movies, and it's pretty fucking brutal. But you know, it obviously doesn't go far enough to make it realistic. That dudes won't fucking crack under pressure and lie. And obviously, the dudes that have been smoking meth are just gonna spill the beans and make up stories or exaggerate things to throw good dudes under the bus. And look at where we are now. So pretty fucking hectic. For me, from a personal point of view, I had the fucking time of my life, and you can clearly see that. And I'm very happy with my decision. I think whether I would have been a 079 assaulting or a bear or a medic or an engineer, I just loved it. I just loved being out on the ground with the boys, and I'm very thankful and appreciative of the opportunities that they gave me, and I guess some of the risks that I took in Afghanistan that gave me the credit to stay on with my team. And then obviously moving on to Iraq and multiple other little deployments and you know, tag rotations and things that I was involved with that I got to stick with it. And you know, it was almost like fucking tickling a cunt with diarrhea. It's just fucking hilarious, like the amount of good times and experiences that I had. I'm fucking stoked for. And you know, I don't know how anyone could then, I can understand how some SIGs or support staff that aren't qualified, that didn't get those same experiences, or maybe they didn't feel included like I did, or they didn't feel like they were a part of that boys club, can then go and sort of stab dudes in the back later on because, you know, maybe they're having mental health issues or whatever. But I had a fucking ball, and I couldn't recommend it to, you know, enough to, for someone. Just throw your fucking app in. People talk about it all the time. Don't talk about it. Just put your fucking selection app in and have a crack. There's only one way to find out. You can do your boring regimental career job later on, but you can only be SF once. You know, you can really only go for it in your 20s, and then it starts to get a bit hard. So have a crack now. And that's why we're all so broken, and fucking our bodies are cooked in our 30s and 40s. And, you know, you don't really see many operators that sort of go past their use by date, because we work fucking hard in our 20s. You know, we spent the majority of our adult lives fighting in Afghanistan or Iraq during that period, when most of the officers, or the senior officers I should say, in defense just sat behind a desk. And, you know, the hardest thing that they did was probably ride their bike from fucking their house in Canberra to Bungendore or Russell offices, and tell everyone how cold it was. So, you know, that's why the CDF, the Chief of the Army, and all these other fuckwits are all old as fuck. You know, you never see a digger or a warrant officer that, you know, that old, because we actually worked hard. You know, when they were sending emails in the headquarters at, you know, 6 o'clock at night, saying that they were too busy to do a field X, we were actually out in the field, you know, covered in shit, and we'd been there for weeks, hungry and tired and missing our families, because that's the life of a soldier. So they'll never understand it, and that's why they're happy to throw dudes under the bus now and think that they're all high and mighty in their little perch in Canberra. But yeah, you don't see people that age as old as, like, some of those dudes look like fucking human scrotums. They're that wrinkly and old. You'll never see a soldier that is that old. So that's why it's so important that when you're enlisting, when you're choosing your role, and you hit those fucking T-junctions in the road where someone says, do you want to be a shooter, or do you want to be someone with a high-end security clearance and all these skills that are employable in the civilian sector if you ever do get injured or do get kicked out for fucking doing something dumb, that you've got all these mad skills to fall back on. Whereas if the only thing that you're good at is walking through a door, and you can't even get out and walk through the door to a fucking job interview because you have nothing to give to that company or that organization other than constantly saying every 5 seconds, I'm an operator. No, I'm an operator. No, I'm a shooter. I used to be a shooter. I'm an operator. Well, cool story, cunt. What does that mean in this organization? That means fucking nothing. You got to be able to transfer those skills that are assaulting compounds and doing some high-end war fighting. You've got to be able to change the language that you use and turn that into something that can make you money and make you valuable in a civilian organization. So what I'm saying is, take your time and really consider why you want to be a shooter or why you want to be SF, because maybe potentially you just want to be posted to SF in your current role rather than actually being a shooter. So, food for thought, cunts. Fuck, some dudes are just designed to be shooters, and there's some dudes that I've met that I can't see them doing any other job in the world. They're that good at it, and they're that fucking passionate about it that good for them. But sometimes you just got to throw caution to the wind and the occasional cunt off a cliff, and that's what they're good at, and I love them for it. And I loved personally just being a part of it, not necessarily assaulting with them, although I was, and although that the SIGs do, because if you think about, let's say a hallway in a building that we're assaulting, the support staff members are naturally going to be towards the back of that stack. So say there's 6 dudes in a stack. By the time they assault the first room on the left, 2 dudes go into that at least. Then 2 or 3 dudes go into the next room on the right. So by the 3rd or 4th door, there's fucking no one left to assault. The SIG and the boss and the officer and the JTAC and the medic, they end up assaulting, and you need to be ready for that at a moment's notice. Or we'd be over in Afghan and we assume that we're going to get into a gunfight in this certain area of the village. So those two teams, the shooters sort of collapse and focus and get a bit tunnel vision on that area. And then all of a sudden we get shot at from a small gun position or a small cave off to the flank. And the PHQ dudes or the mortars team or some fucking random dudes end up assaulting it and getting fucking medals for it. So it's pretty hectic, and you've always got to be ready for it. But for me, I was just happy, although I had a Green Beret and I had the trust of the dudes that I was with, I was actually just stoked to be following them around like a little kid, like sort of Richie Beno, just commentating over the radio every time they shot someone. Great shot, yes, marvellous. Oh, that's 2 from 2, Jono, that's 2 from 2. And just absolutely taking the piss, just providing light comedic relief to high stress situations where dudes are fucking peaking. And I just saw my mate shot a dude's fucking head off, and then that dude's children have run out of the compound and are literally picking up his brain off the ground and scooping it into their dad's skull to try and revive him, because naturally Afghan kids don't really have a concept of sort of medical science. And that was probably one of the wildest things that I've ever sort of been in the vicinity of seeing. That dude was running with an AK to try and flank us, but he didn't see the mortars team was down in the creek line just fucking waiting there tactically with good cam and concealment. So my mate shot him in the head, and he kind of sardined himself into the ground. And yeah, his kids run out and is literally scooping his brains off the ground and then slapping them back into his skull, trying to revive him. And while this is all going on and there's a high stress kind of situation, the only thing that could have made that sort of whole crazy situation sort of better was a fucking cheeky joke. And naturally Skojo comes through with a cheeky little comment that makes everyone giggle. And someone said, that was the most hectic thing I've ever seen in my life. And I said, well, the part where the kids were playing fucking sandcastles with their dad's brains, that just made it so much better. And fucking shit, and if that's all my job was and that's all I had to do was just to keep the boys happy, and then now post-service in my discharge little world, if that's all I have to do to keep dudes from fucking topping themselves or crying into their beers every night because they didn't acquire any other skills and they just shut their blinds every night and say, I used to be an operator and you need to respect me and fucking give me free shit because I earned it. Well, yeah, you did, bro, but you also sort of limited yourself. So if I can give those boys a cheeky giggle and remind them of the good times and the fun stories through, Bedtime Warriors, then I'm all fucking for it. So hope you enjoyed it, cunts. It was a little bit more knowledge than fucking Warriors this time, but it seems like that's all you cunts want to know is about selection. So now you know, and I hope that helps you, cunts. So put your apps in, stop being little fucking fuckwits. Alright, cunts. Uru, ta-da, toodles.